Excellent. Well, I think we're good to get started. Welcome everyone to CivicSpark's Poster Symposium series, celebrating the accomplishments of the 2021-2022 CivicSpark Fellow Cohort. My name is Layla Shablak. I am the Northern California Regional Coordinator for CivicSpark, a national service program of CivicWell. I will be facilitating today's session with Daniel Keim, CivicSpark's Greater Sacramento Regional Coordinator, who will help moderate this session. I just wanted to run through some logistical details before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's call, please message Daniel Keim directly using the chat feature and he can help you troubleshoot. Every fellow will have around 8 minutes to present their capstone posters and answer questions. Their posters summarize key accomplishments from their 11 months of service to local governments across California. After each presentation, we will open it up to a couple of questions from the audience, which you may ask directly by either unmuting yourself or sending it through the chat box for staff to read out loud. And finally, I would also like to encourage audience participation throughout this virtual event. Please share your encouragement and congratulations to our fellows. We encourage you all to use your webcams if that is available to you. So without further ado, let's get into the main show. We will start the day hearing from Lian serving with the city of Long Beach, followed by Jillian Queri, serving with the city of Encinitas. Take it away, Lian.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Lian Tualla, and I'm a senior CivicSpark fellow serving the city of Long Beach. I was fortunate enough to work under both development services in the Planning Bureau, as well as the city manager office for the Office of Sustainability. I supported the implementation of the city's first climate action adaptation plan, known as CAAP, starting as a California Climate Action Corps fellow in 2021. The vision of the Long Beach CAAP is to create a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable city. The plan details actions in several climate mitigation and adaptation stressors, some of which include extreme heat, transportation, and air quality. Today, I will be going over my two main projects, the Youth Climate Ambassador Program and the CAAP dashboard. Next slide, please. The purpose of the dashboard is to create a visually engaging, accessible, and data-rich platform that communicates CAAP initiatives to both city staff and Long Beach residents. I supported its data collection, data management workflow, and graphic design. When developing the dashboard, we wanted to ensure that it was a combination of both an open data dashboard as well as a community dashboard. In essence, we wanted to make both data and context easily accessible and digestible. We also took an iterative approach where the dashboard will be updated over time with more data sets and features. Next slide, please. Some of the outcomes for the dashboard is that I've designed 10 pages through the tool Adobe XD as a sort of interactive mockup. The dashboard will also portray 5 core mitigation metrics and 9 greenhouse gas pathways from the CAAP. In addition to that, it will portray 4 adaptation maps. We are also able to conduct user experience research by creating 4 user personas, which are basically fictional characters that can represent real people from the city, as well as 11 user testing sessions where community members were able to interact with the mockup and provide feedback. Currently, it's being developed on our city platform called Open Data Soft and is slated to be released later this summer. Next slide, please. So on to the Youth Climate Ambassador Program. So the goal of the Youth Climate Ambassador Program, otherwise known as UCAP, was to involve more local residents in implementing the CAAP. We wanted the CAAP to be more accessible and directly engage with youth on climate action. We also knew we had to center equity in its development, so I used a toolkit, the Spectrum of Community Engagement to Ownership, as a reference for equitable practices, as you can see on the right. We prioritized applicants from SB 535 communities, known as disadvantaged communities, and ended up with 8 out of our 11 youth being from these SB 535 communities. We also had a great geographic range of youth coming from all over the city, but again, prioritizing areas that are disproportionately impacted in North, West, and Central Long Beach, as shown in this map. We were also able to secure funding to ensure that ambassadors were being financially compensated for their time. Ambassadors could work up to 15 hours per week and earn $15 per hour. Next slide, please. Over the course of the 10-week program, we organized and facilitated 10 trainings and 3 impact projects. Weekly trainings provided the ambassadors a holistic education on climate action with topics ranging from ecology to environmental justice and equitable city planning, with many guest speakers presenting on a specific subject matter. Ambassadors then applied this education on their impact projects of CAAP digital media, urban greening through tree planting, and ecological restoration at Willow Springs Park. Some outcomes of UCAP include 12 outreach events, 7 restoration events, 20 signups for our Free Fruit Trees and Front Yards program, and over 850 hours of service. Five of our ambassadors have also decided to continue working for the city of Long Beach, and I am proud to say that a second cohort is coming in 2023. And yeah, next slide, please. And yeah, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure working with the city of Long Beach. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Lian May. Feel free to put your questions in the chat or unmute yourself. There's a question coming in from Karen. Can you tell us more about what recruitment methods you used for the Climate Ambassador program?
Yeah, so for the recruitment process, we advertised on the Office of Sustainability social media, so mainly through like our Instagram and Facebook. Our partner in Pacific Gateway Workforce Innovation, they also helped facilitate outreach through their own social media. But one of my recommendations for next year is actually to further extend that, especially to organizations that are not traditionally seen as green, like cultural organizations or even like environmental justice organizations. So yeah, definitely that could be room for improvement.
Excellent. There's another question coming in from Cheyenne. What was the most rewarding part of your projects?
This is so hard because I feel like I was really fortunate to have such fulfilling projects, but I think a highlight definitely was when I was able to actually move down to Long Beach to facilitate UCAP since I was a hybrid program. And previously I've been fully remote. So it was really nice actually finally being able to immerse myself in the community that I was serving and, you know, actually working with my coworkers in person and yeah, just doing a lot more like field work, like tree planting and all of that. So that was definitely a highlight of my service year.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lian May. Next up, we'll hear from Jillian Queri, followed by Karen Chen, serving with the city of Cupertino. Jillian, take it away.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jillian Queri, and I have proudly been serving the city of Encinitas for the past 7 months as a Climate Action Plan Fellow. So working as a CAAP Fellow, one of my primary responsibilities has been implementing and publishing the 2020 Climate Action Plan annual report for the city. So just a quick project overview. The city of Encinitas was able to establish a comprehensive climate action plan, or CAAP, in 2018. So since then, the city publishes detailed reports every year to inform constituents about any updates regarding the status of the CAAP's 20 measures, in addition to providing general info on the city's efforts to mitigate climate change and to reduce community greenhouse gas emissions. So as a fellow beginning in September of 2021, it was my responsibility to verify all the data in the 2020 CAAP, write, develop, format, and then finally publish the CAAP in March of 2022. So part of the CAAP, in addition to developing the report, which is about an 80-page document, we also, similarly to Lian May, have a climate dashboard, which is an interactive version of our climate action plan. So in addition to publishing the report, I also was responsible for updating the dashboard with new data. 2020 was a target year for the city. So we have 2 target years outlined in our CAAP, 2020 and 2030. So this was a really big, important milestone for the city. We were proud to have completed 7 of our 20 measures. As of 2020, 11 were also in progress and only 2 were awaiting resources. So the city so far is making great progress on implementing all of our measures outlined in the CAAP. The CAAP includes 7 different categories: building efficiency, renewable energy, clean and efficient transportation, off-road equipment, zero waste, water efficiency, and carbon sequestration. So after our CAAP was published in March of 2022, we received 2nd place, or a silver medal, from the Climate Action Campaign for our efforts and the implementation of our CAAP. This is really exciting, and it was great to see that our city is kind of leading the way in the San Diego region in terms of implementing a CAAP in a community. So just a few highlights. These were kind of the 7 measures that we completed in 2020. The city was able to establish a community choice energy program, which means that the residents of Encinitas and all businesses now are using 100% renewable energy, which is very exciting. We are also requiring new homes to install solar PV systems. We are regularly conducting water rate studies and are continuing to implement approved water rates. And since living in Southern California, we're frequently in a drought, we've seen a decrease in residents' water usage, which is exciting and positive to see. We also now require residential EV charging stations. We are slowly transitioning our municipal fleet to zero emissions. So at present, a lot of our vehicles are hybrid or all electric, but in the future, we hope for them to reach all electric. A few years back, we adopted a leaf blower ordinance, which requires all kind of gardening equipment in the city to be operated via an electric motor versus a gas motor. So this has really helped improve our air quality in the city and contributes to decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions as a community. And finally, we have a really healthy and growing urban tree cover. So not only does this contribute to carbon sequestration, but also improves the quality of life for our residents. In 2020, it was our biggest planting year. We proudly planted 196 trees in city parks and city streets. So overall, we're very excited about how the city is continuing to pursue environmental action. And currently I'm working on the 2021 iteration of the Climate Action Plan. So hopefully we'll continue to see more measures move from the in progress category to completed. But yeah, overall, a very successful year for the city of Encinitas. And I feel honored to have had the opportunity to work on this project.
Congratulations, Jillian, and thank you for your service. I'd like to open it up for questions. So again, feel free to unmute yourself or type your question in the chat box. We have a question from Cheyenne. Did you work on the report alone, or were you part of a team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our city, we have a very small but mighty sustainability department led by my supervisor, Crystal Nahara, and myself. So this project was me, and then Crystal was advising kind of my work and reviewing everything. But from start to finish, I also had the help of last year's fellow as well. She got me started with some of the data, but pretty much it was just me and Crystal on this one. So team of 2. Thank you for all the positive encouragement.
Great. Any other questions? Great. I think we're ready to move on to our next speaker. Thanks again, Jillian. Next up, we'll hear from Chen, followed by Cheyenne Vance. Karen, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen, and I'll be talking today about assessing vulnerabilities and adapting to climate change in the city of Cupertino. And as the title suggests, the goal of this project was to assess climate change vulnerabilities and incorporate adaptation planning into our Climate Action Plan, or CAAP 2.0. And before I started this fellowship, my team had already identified 6 hazards of concern, which were adverse air quality impacts, drought, extreme heat, extreme precipitation and storm flooding, sea level rise, and wildfire. So my job coming in was to assess our vulnerability to these 6 hazards using the state's adaptation planning guide. The first step was to assess potential impact, which I did by researching climate change projections and looking at our community data to understand not only the severity of any potential impacts, but also the vulnerable communities who may be affected. And using this information, I scored these hazards qualitatively from low to high. And the next step after that was to look at the local and regional adaptive capacity. So understanding through looking at planning and operations, how the city might be prepared for any incoming climate hazards. And I did that by looking at the city's documents, which includes elements of our general plan, as well as documents from regional partners, such as the County of Santa Clara and Valley Water. And as you can see, I also scored this qualitatively from low to high. And the last step after that was to conduct interviews with relevant stakeholders, such as the County Public Health Department and our city's Office of Emergency Management, just to integrate the expertise and experience they had, as well as validate the information I had from my research. And the final results of the vulnerability assessment are available on the right side of this poster here. And you can see that vulnerability correlates with where we have low adaptive capacity and higher potential impacts. In this case, the top 2 being adverse air quality impacts and extreme heat. The next step after completing this was to use the results to inform which adaptation measures were added to our CAAP 2.0. And the 4 that were identified were first to add more natural infrastructure such as bioswales. And this was to take advantage of the multiple co-benefits that come from this, including greening that can lower ambient temperatures, decrease flooding risks, and increase drought resilience by storing more groundwater. The second was to add this data and incorporate it into city emergency preparedness and response to make sure that the city is prepared for how these hazards might intensify over time. Third was to build community capacity, and this one was a key one because of the vulnerability that we identified with extreme heat and adverse air quality impacts. A large part of this was a lack of understanding from our communities in how these hazards would affect their health and their safety, and not having really the resources or capabilities to respond to them. And finally, the last was to coordinate with the County of Santa Clara, especially since they have their vulnerability assessment, which was just released, and their climate roadmap 2030, which will be released later this year. So in addition to these 4 adaptation measures, I also saw the opportunity to increase community resilience by collaborating with the Office of Emergency Management to create a climate resilience training program called Green Blocks. So this and the next steps will come in the next few slides. So the next slide, please. To provide more information about Green Blocks, this is a program that focuses on climate solutions and community connection. And the way this program works is that we have residents who can form teams with their neighbors or another form of community grouping and go through a series of 9 meetings. And these 9 meetings will cover topics such as home energy, transportation, and emergency preparedness. They'll learn about city resources related to these topics, as well as identify community resources, which may be a neighbor who has electrified their home and can offer advice, or someone who can check in on maybe a senior member of the team in case of extreme heat or another emergency. And the greatest part, I believe, about this program is that members are able to, in a supportive environment, practice the skills that they've learned and engage in group activities, such as planning active transportation routes and mapping their block to understand how they can respond as a community to emergencies. Next slide, please. As for next steps, the most obvious one is to continue building green blocks. This is in a pilot phase right now, but there are opportunities to increase recruitment as well as plan for expansions and future iterations. The second is to explore other opportunities to build community resilience, such as offering more programming and exploring the potential for community resilience centers. Third is to continue participating in regional adaptation planning, especially with the county recently initiating its heat and air quality resilience working group. There are a lot of opportunities there, as well as other regional networks to tap into. And finally, integrating the data from the vulnerability assessment into city planning and operations, including our upcoming health and safety element update, as well as continuing to develop key partnerships, such as with our Office of Emergency Management. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Congratulations, Karen, and thank you for your service. Yeah, taking questions in the chat, but also feel free to unmute yourself. Ooh, we have a question from Sarah. How has the Green Blocks pilot participation gone so far?
So the pilot participation has not been super high so far since we've recently only started with recruitment, but we're looking to tap in not only to the existing block leader program, which is under the Office of Emergency Management, but also into existing sustainability groups and hopefully folding them into our block program or other community resilience programs that we're looking to start up.
Awesome. Another question came in. Are there any plans to continue community connection and green blocks after the end of the program? For example, alumni meetings?
I think at this point, we're really just looking at starting the program. The rationale for working with the Office of Emergency Management was to tap into the existing network of block leaders, as well as revitalize a program that had kind of fallen a bit stagnant with the pandemic. And so one avenue that we've been looking at in continuing to foster this level of participation is by increasing interest in joining the block leader program. But at this point, we haven't really fully fleshed out any future programming we might start that they might be a good fit for.
Awesome. Thank you again, Karen. Next up, we will hear from Cheyenne, followed by Youngdahl. So yeah, Cheyenne, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheyenne Vance, and I serve as a fellow with LA County Public Works, specifically with the Strategic Planning and Sustainability Office. So we were tasked with developing a sustainability reporting framework and a GHG inventory for the entire department. And just for some context, Public Works has over 3,000 employees and is comprised of 7 branches, including construction management, environmental services, water resources, and transportation services, just to name a few. So you could imagine that each of these branches have very different and unique functions, meaning we would need to develop metrics specific to their operation. So the sustainability section was a 2-member team when I joined, and they wanted a fellow to help research sustainability reporting frameworks, create metrics to fit the needs of each division, and to collect data for a GHG inventory. And this project helped Public Works figure out which data they were tracking, what could be tracked, and what data was not available. And also to help them develop an emissions baseline that they could eventually use for a full sustainability report. So for the first 5 months, our team researched sustainability reporting frameworks and case studies from other companies. We also attempted to find other Public Works sustainability reports, but there weren't many to be found, which indicated to us that LA Public Works was most likely one of the first of its kind to develop a sustainability report. And after developing the scope, we began the long process of interviewing representatives from each division that could speak to the specific functions and operations that their division is responsible for. So these interviews helped our team to develop Public Works specific metrics that weren't necessarily available in existing sustainability frameworks, such as the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI. And then we created a spreadsheet to send out to each division where they could compile their sustainability data into one home and submit it to our team. And with this database, we forward it to our consultants, who are still currently creating a data tracking tool that our staff can hopefully use to update our website annually. So throughout the process, we had to revise our scope and adjust our approach to make our efforts more efficient. Originally, we planned to do over 47 interviews with each division, but decided to compress this into a total of 12 interviews at a higher level, at the branch level. And then we met with specific divisions as needed, such as the fleet division, who provided a lot of the vehicle fleet data that we use for our GHG inventory. And we also extended the timeline of the interview process after realizing that this effort was the most important part of the project and required much more time than we had originally allotted for it. So a major takeaway here is the larger your agency, the more time you should allot to the outreach portion of your project to account for any scheduling conflicts and follow-up interviews. Another big takeaway from this project is that many staff members view sustainability as a chore and are a bit intimidated by the subject. So at one of our bi-monthly meetings, we had our staff complete a word cloud, if you can see it down here in the left corner. And some of the most popular words used were expensive and unachievable. So we observed that during our interviews, many division heads, they couldn't see how sustainability was relevant to their operations. So following this feedback, we spent more time breaking down the 3 pillars of sustainability, especially focusing on the social and governance aspects of it. And this highlighted to us the importance of updating the way we frame sustainability issues, depending on which audience we were presenting to. And finally, our GHG inventory revealed that the traffic safety and mobility division was responsible for 55% of overall emissions at Public Works, which is really significant. And upon closer investigation, our team was able to identify, surprisingly, that streetlights were the largest contributor to the traffic safety division's emissions. So continue to identify which operations are contributing most to emissions will allow the Public Works team to make necessary changes to reduce their emissions, such as switching to streetlights to LED bulbs or switching to cleaner fuels for equipment that is used on a daily basis. And for next steps, Public Works is developing a net zero energy roadmap to reach carbon neutrality goals set at the state and local levels and identify which measures they can take to address their emissions. Both the sustainability reporting tool and zero energy roadmap should be completed within the next few months. And finally, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the SPSO team and LA Public Works for giving me a real close look at how county government works. And also, I learned a lot about infrastructure. So thank you everyone for listening to my presentation, and please feel free to ask any questions you have.
Congratulations, Cheyenne, and thank you for your 11 months of service. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Awesome. Karen has a question for you. In addition to reframing sustainability issues, is your team looking at other options for increasing buy-in and support for sustainability?
Yeah, Public Works is kind of being forced to embrace sustainability by like California legislation. So they really don't have an option. So it's up to our team to kind of make this transition a little easier. So we're really working to educate staff more at our Sustainability Council meetings, really trying to just give them examples of what other infrastructure agencies are doing and how all of this fits together for them. So yeah, I think there's not really too much of an option at this point. And to Teagan, we didn't use a specific program. We had a consultant, luckily, and they did it for us, but they just used Excel.
Yeah, we have one last question. Did the PW team request that the tool include cost or other parameters outside of greenhouse gas emissions?
We did not. We're still kind of in the process, and a big problem was we wanted more granular data. So we want to be able to see like what emissions is coming from which infrastructure. So that's currently where we're working at. We haven't really started to look at the costs yet.
Well, thank you again, Cheyenne. Next up, we'll hear from Anne, followed by Cameron Grannis serving with the city of Irvine. Take it away, Anne.
Awesome. Thank you, Layla, and good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Ann Youngdahl. I'm the Climate Action Planning Fellow for the South Bay Cities Council of Governments, or the South Bay CAAP. So the South Bay Cities Council of Governments is a joint powers authority that serves the subregion, which covers the southwestern corner of Los Angeles County. It has 15 different member cities. And by 2017, all of these 15 member cities had adopted a climate action plan, or a CAAP, with the COG's support, which is great. As a basis for these climate action plans, greenhouse gas emissions inventories were conducted for each city individually, as well as for the subregion as a whole, based on data from 2005, 2007, 2010, and 2012. In alignment with statewide targets, these CAAPs set their first emissions reduction targets for 2020. So the multi-goal is to produce 32 greenhouse gas emissions inventories. That's one for each of those cities, plus one for the subregion as a whole for both 2019 and 2020. But more specifically for my project, the goal is to develop a replicable strategy for updating those emissions inventories for member cities and to evaluate progress towards CAAP goals, celebrate those successes, and identify what next steps there might be for reaching future greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets in service of supporting an overall more resilient subregion. So to begin the service here, I focused on building a network of city staff responsible for climate work across all of our member cities. Because each city has a different organizational structure, these staff representatives came from a variety of different departments. We then hosted a kickoff meeting, which 9 of our cities attended, to reintroduce the COG's climate work and open up that collaborative process with our cities. Another critical partner that I spoke to frequently was ICLEI. The South Bay COG is a member of ICLEI, which is an organization that provides a protocol and an online portal called ClearPath for completing greenhouse gas emissions inventories. And I worked with ICLEI to identify which emissions accounting measures were most appropriate for the subregion's cities specifically. ClearPath divides inventories into different sectors or categories. The emissions are related to energy, transportation, water, treatment, delivery, wastewater, and waste. And working with ICLEI led me to that next step of then reaching out to the various utilities and service providing agencies within the region who provided us with that necessary data. To do so, I created data requests personalized by year, by city, and by emissions sector. And the resulting templates can be used to replicate the emissions inventory process in the future. We first focused on energy-related emissions because it is one of the 2 biggest sectors, the other being transportation, that make up the vast majority of emissions in the subregion. This included requesting electricity and natural gas usage data from Southern California Edison and SoCal Gas, respectively. And then as we've started to receive the data, I began to process that, organizing it, analyzing it, and entering it into that ClearPath portal. Finally, I've done work on documenting the process to generate recommendations for continuing and repeating the inventory in the future to hopefully streamline that process to provide those regular updates in terms of evaluating our climate goals. This project will be continued by another CivicSpark fellow next service year, so there are a lot of great next steps to be taken by them. We will use the data request templates to finalize that data collection process for any outstanding information, and then complete the data analysis using the ICLEI ClearPath portal. After evaluating how cities' emissions profiles have changed over time, back from those original inventories based on the 2005 data, where they set their emissions reduction targets through to 2012 and now to 2019 and 2020. And then they will communicate those findings with member cities with a focus on evaluating progress towards the emissions reduction goals that they set, and then identifying either new or ongoing emissions reduction strategies, pulling from those CAAPs that they adopted. So I look forward to seeing this project continued and completed for our member cities. And just before I wrap up, I couldn't have completed all this work without the amazing collaboration from so many people at the South Bay COG, as well as all the city staff and utility staff working on data requests, and ICLEI, as well as the Civical staff and the Civical cohort. So thank you to all the kind of collaborators in this process. If you have any questions, we can go to that now.
Congratulations, Anne, and thank you for your service. Yeah, again, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. I have a question. I know that you've worked with a lot of data for this project, and I know that your research previous to CivicSpark was involved in sustainability metrics. Do you have any advice for an incoming fellow who will be working with data for the first time in their career?
What an interesting question. It's funny, I definitely expected the project to be more data intensive than I think it was at these earlier stages, because there was a lot of connecting with partners that needed to be done before we reached that stage. But once we kind of arrive at that point, I think working with your kind of organization to identify what our kind of file organizational structure works for you, and then sticking to that is really key, especially when there's so many different cities, different sectors, different years involved. So I think that taking the time to plan that out is really a helpful step in the process.
Great point. Thank you. Another question came in. How was your experience coordinating with 15 cities? Were there any interesting insights working with such a wide breadth of cities?
Yeah, yes, there were definitely a great learning experience to see what different needs different cities had, and what different resources or interests cities had. Some cities are much more heavily residential, some cities are much more heavily commercial or industrial. So that affects their, from a climate or emissions inventory perspective, that has a really big impact. And then I talked a little bit about how cities are organized differently at the kind of government structure level, or they have different levels of interest or different resources that they can or cannot dedicate to this. So I think the kind of insight for me was, okay, each city is a really unique case and needs to be taken as such and needs to be personally adapted. There isn't a one size fits all approach, and you need to take those unique needs into account.
Excellent. One more question came into the chat. Natalie noticed that Harbor Gateway, San Pedro is included in the subregion, and these are parts of the city of LA. Was it difficult to find data for those areas since they have to be separated from LA?
Yeah, so that's one of the tricky, with the shape of the city of LA, it's got that little extra shoestring piece. It's definitely a tricky challenge. I think that for the most part, we worked with the individual cities, and the city of LA has its own kind of structure and resources for that. So we didn't dive too deep into that. I think it's also about, remember, okay, how is this going to be used? Is it valuable for just that piece of the city of LA to have their own separate report, or can that be folded into the greater city of LA? So we kind of left that to that. Great question.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anne. Next up, we'll hear from Cameron, followed by Jackie Weeden, serving with the city of La Mesa. So Cameron, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hi, my name is Cameron Grannis, and for the past 11 months, I've been working on developing community outreach for the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, as well as our other climate and energy programs at my project site, the city of Irvine. So right when I joined the team, Irvine was kicking off the development of their first Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, or CAAP. Irvine had recently committed to an ambitious moonshot goal of carbon neutrality by 2030, making it the first city in Orange County to make this commitment and necessitating a really robust plan for GHG emissions reductions in the city. So the CAAP will provide a way to do this, laying out a roadmap for municipal and community-wide GHG emissions reduction and climate adaptation measures in The initial scope of my project was to support the community engagement for the CAAP, in addition to supporting the outreach in partnership with our consultant on the project, I developed outreach strategies to increase the reach of our CAAP engagement efforts to make it more accessible to the Irvine community and ensure an equitable representation of the entire Irvine population. However, after kicking off our outreach with the first stakeholder outreach meetings, we received a pause on the project due to some changes in the city, which caused me to shift and change the trajectory of my project a little bit. So while the CAAP was on pause, I focused on developing a clear outreach strategy that could be employed when the project is ready to move forward. Additionally, we expanded the focus of our climate and energy efforts to provide programs that could make an impact now for residents looking to reduce their emissions. So we launched a number of programs during the past year, including the Cool Irvine program, the Electrify Irvine program, and Solarize Irvine. So to support these programs, I planned and led outreach workshops, managed website updates and marketing, and attended community events to promote the work we were doing. So the picture on the right-hand side of the poster is at one of these events, the Sustainability Carnival at UC Irvine. So as I mentioned, in terms of the CAAP outreach on my project, I really focused on developing an outreach strategy that can be used once we start moving forward with CAAP development. The outcomes of this effort are in the lower box on the left-hand side of the poster. So first is the CAAP supplemental outreach plan, which lays out the primary outreach strategy in support of CAAP development. The goals of the outreach plan include increasing the variety of outreach methods in order to ensure that more Irvine residents have the opportunity to participate and provide input on CAAP development. Bringing outreach opportunities to the Irvine community to ensure that participation is not limited to those who are already involved in environmental programs, and identifying underrepresented groups in the community and focusing outreach opportunities for these individuals to ensure equitable CAAP development. Another aspect of the CAAP outreach is the youth outreach plan, which outlines an education and engagement program for youth leaders. So the strategy I designed for this really focuses on empowering youth to define how they want to provide their input and educate their peers on the CAAP. And luckily, we were actually able to get started on rolling out this program. So we partnered with the High School Youth Action Team, which is a youth leadership program in Irvine, and we'll be hosting a presentation to them next week to educate program participants and lead a creative activity to engage the students in developing outreach for the CAAP. Lastly, I developed tools to help facilitate CAAP outreach, including the Outreach Toolkit, which is a summary of marketing and outreach strategies and target populations and community groups, and the presentation slides adapted from the slides for the youth outreach meeting, which can be used during outreach meetings to community groups, which was one of the strategies in the supplemental outreach plan. Moving forward and thinking on next steps, as I mentioned, we'll be launching the youth outreach program with a presentation next week. And Irvine will actually have another climate and energy CivicSpark fellow joining them next year, who will continue to support our climate and energy programs and implement the CAAP outreach strategy outlined in the supplemental outreach plan. And this is really only a portion of the work I've done to support our climate and energy programs and everything I've learned the past year. It's been really amazing working in Irvine's environmental programs division. I've learned a lot about developing effective climate and energy programs and climate action planning. So thank you so much to the team in Irvine that I've worked with the past year. I'm really grateful for this experience, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and congratulations on your 11 months of service. There's a question that came in from Jillian. Has the youth outreach program been well received?
Yeah, so we actually are just launching that next week. So I'll have to update you after that presentation. But so far, I think working with the program leaders that we're partnering with to lead the program, it's been exciting because it was kind of a perfect partnership. The students that we're working with are already familiar with like designing activities for their peers. So hopefully I think it'll go well. And yeah, it's a great partnership, so I'm excited.
Great. Any other questions coming up for folks? Oh, Sophia says, did you have outreach experiences previously? And how did you enter that role?
Yeah, before this, I had worked for the City of Sacramento's Parks Planning Division, where I worked with them to lead outreach for the Parks Master Plan. So I think that experience was really helpful, especially when I was developing the outreach strategy. I think I drew on that experience and what had been successful. So I think that was pretty monumental. I don't know if I would have been able to kind of design an outreach strategy on my own if I hadn't had experience doing that in a role before this.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Cameron. Next up, we'll hear from Jackie, followed by Olivia Garcia with the County of Monterey. Take it away, Jackie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Weeden, and I'm excited to share my Capstone project with you all to let you know about the exciting things I was able to work on while at the City of La Mesa. The City of La Mesa's Climate Action Plan, CAAP for short, is a roadmap to reduce emissions by 15% by 2020 and by 53% by 2035 from the 2010 baseline. There are 5 key strategy areas in solid waste, energy, green infrastructure, transportation, and water with 25 measures, all of which have begun the implementation process. In 2018, the Climate Action Plan, the city made a commitment to release CAAP annual report updates each year to review the accomplishments the city made towards our CAAP goals, which was one of my projects, was to work on the annual report. And through a partnership with Sandag's recap program, the city receives greenhouse gas inventory updates every 2 years. Like I said, one of my main projects included creating the Climate Action Plan annual report for 2021. This project, I gathered data from various municipal departments to gather updates on the city's progress towards things like the amount of solar permits, waste tonnage, green infrastructure additions for the year 2021, etc. I compiled this data that city employees provided me into the report and was presented to City Council and provided them and residents with the great things the environmental department accomplished. I am happy to report that for the year 2021, the City of La Mesa saw an increase of sustainability efforts by city staff and residents. Another project consisted of drafting a memo and a request for qualifications to bring a comprehensive energy saving project to the city through an energy saving company, also known as an ESCO. I began this project by researching where the available ESCOs were located and which cities had already gone this route. This is a unique opportunity for the city to hire a consultant to analyze city buildings, create a benchmark, construct the project for the city, develop a cost-benefit analysis that reflects how suggested improvements will reduce costs for the city and enable the city to pay off the project through energy and water savings. Unfortunately, I ran out of time, and the current state of this project is in a final draft RFQ form and is ready for the next fellow to take on. Lastly, one of the larger projects that required the help of myself, Alexa, and Hillary, my site supervisor, was Senate Bill 1383 implementation. I was tasked with implementing organic recycling within all municipal buildings. I completed internal and external bin audits to identify areas to place new green bins and containers so that the city staff have a place to dispose of their organic waste while in the office. Once this audit was done, I moved on to creating an educational presentation to give to city staff to educate them all on understanding SB 1383 and how to properly sort their waste with a new green bin in their workspace. With the help of my co-fellow Alexa, we were able to educate almost all city personnel, as well as get creative with Heartland Fire Department to create an educational YouTube video on organic waste recycling that is now being shared with 2 additional cities' fire departments. Once all this was completed, we moved forward with ordering indoor green bins for all city facilities and worked with EDCO, the city's waste hauler, on delivering outdoor green containers. Next slide, please. Not only did I work on great projects, but the past 11 months was filled with professional development as well. And my co-fellow and I received vital experience working alongside our site supervisor, Hillary, and worked on projects apart from our main projects related to the CAAP, such as working with Tree San Diego and Urban Core to plant trees associated with our Cal Fire grant. We attended various conferences and trainings. We helped plan 3 different bike-related events for Bike Month. With the help of my site supervisor, I applied and was accepted into graduate school. I created an idling policy for our municipal fleet. My co-fellow and I created a script and was part of a CAAP video production for the city. And I worked with the county on creating educational signage in Spanish for organic waste recycling. Overall, the experience and mentorship has provided me with the tools and confidence going into my future roles. And I want to specifically thank Alexa and Hillary for being an awesome team and my regional coordinator, Paulina, for all the help and support. Thank you. That is my presentation.
Thank you, Jackie, and congratulations on your 11 months of service.
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Karen is asking, well, first, Karen says that amazing work across multiple areas. What were your favorite projects?
I think my favorite projects were the Senate Bill 1383 implementation, just because I was able to get to know every facility in the city of La Mesa and talk to everyone that works in every building. And also giving the presentations to everyone. Although I'm not a fan of public speaking, the presentations really helped me with breaking out of that fear, which I'm grateful for my site supervisor for pushing me to do that. And then I also had a lot of fun planning the bike-related events that were going on in May. A lot of it was with the community, so it was really exciting to see the community come together, especially for Bike to Work Day, and how excited everyone was. So those were probably my 2 favorite.
Great. I'm seeing a comment from Daniel. Yeah, definitely couldn't tell that you get nervous public speaking. That's a presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Jackie. Next, we'll hear from Olivia Garcia, followed by Teagan Felknor-Edwards, serving with the city of Elk Grove. So without further ado, take it away, Olivia.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Garcia, and I served with the County of Monterey Sustainability Program this year. And my work was primarily centered around supporting the development of the county's first Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which I'll be referring to as the CAAP throughout. So the CAAP was originally identified by the county's 2010 general plan as a mitigation measure in the final environmental impact report. And it's intended to be an opportunity for robust stakeholder engagement amongst the various sectors of the county to select strategies that are most cost effective and beneficial for the county in meeting its emissions reductions targets. So the sustainability program has been working on the CAAP since early 2021 and has a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 in the unincorporated areas of Monterey County. So when I first began my fellowship, the county was just beginning the first phase of the CAAP's development through stakeholder engagement and outreach. And the sustainability program aimed to collect input from a broad variety of stakeholders and community members by offering various methods of engagement for the CAAP's development. And this engagement process was broken down primarily into 2 phases, starting with education and visioning, which was the focus for the first 4 to 5 months of my fellowship. And then we moved into the next phase of strategy development and prioritization, which has been the focus for the remainder of my fellowship. And so my role primarily involved supporting outreach and engagement for anything CAAP related. So this included promotion of our public stakeholder meetings, communicating monthly CAAP email updates, assisting with updates to our online engagement platform, among a lot of various other activities. And so just a quick overview of the engagement process. It primarily entailed outreach for pretty frequent stakeholder meetings that were held throughout the year. So these varied from smaller focus group style meetings, such as our agriculture focus group, sector working groups, and a business roundtable, and then to larger, more public community meetings, such as our community workshop. And then also through monthly email updates, any other updates through a climate inbox, social media, and our online interactive engagement platform. And so kind of looking through at key takeaways from this year, we kind of gathered input from all meetings and saw pretty common themes, pretty consistently expressed that one, increased education surrounding climate action is needed, especially in multiple languages. Many express that educational barriers coupled with language barriers prevent many communities from engaging with processes like the CAAP. And so we see educational opportunities that could be implemented as adaptation strategies in the CAAP through partnerships with existing organizations, funded grants, or other means of building community resilience. And additionally, something that was expressed in almost every setting was that incorporating equity into any strategy that reduces greenhouse gas emissions or focuses on climate adaptation is essential. So as the CAAP process moves into the next phase of strategy prioritization, a key focus will be on analyzing the costs and benefits of each strategy, and will be a large focus in meetings with our equity panel. And then finally, evident through all of our work on the CAAP is that developing local and regional partnerships is the key to succeeding at any of the climate action goals that we set. So all the goals we hope to achieve through the CAAP can be made possible through partnerships, whether that be through existing organizations like local community choice energy aggregators, local businesses, or community-based organizations. And then just wanted to go on to the next slide to give an example of some of the outreach materials that I worked on this year. So I created some of these info packets that we called community profiles related to each emission sector in the county. And we provided these as additional resources before hosting some of our sector specific meetings. And we wanted to just kind of give an overview of each sector for the baseline year of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which was 2019. In an effort to provide a little bit more understanding of different behavioral aspects of the community, such as commuting characteristics and vehicle populations, as well as other socioeconomic factors, just to give people another reference when starting to think about strategies and how it would work for our specific community. And we also created Spanish versions with all of accompanying materials for these presentations so that we could provide a little bit more accessibility. So yeah, that concludes my presentation.
Congratulations, Olivia, and thank you for your service. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Skylar asks, were there any themes from the outreach you did that were common across sectors?
I think it was definitely a learning process from the beginning of the year till now, and very interesting to see like some of the similar meetings that we held in the fall to now. So I think probably the common theme that I started to pick up on was like not assuming that anyone had any baseline knowledge of climate change, sustainability, or anything related to local government and planning processes. So that was something myself I was learning throughout the year, and really just taking it at the most simple level with any communications, regardless if I'm working with somebody who's been working in the energy industry for however many years. Everyone's excited to learn. So that was definitely something I think I learned throughout the year.
Daniel asks, what was your favorite aspect of your project work?
I think just like the learning process. I came into this year with very little experience in the sustainability and climate world. So as I was creating a lot of these outreach materials, I myself was learning along the way, which definitely was challenging, but also really rewarding, because I feel like I came away this year with so much more information and trying to figure out what it is I'm interested myself in for what's next. So that was definitely, I think, the most rewarding part.
Yeah, and speaking about what's next, Sky is asking how your work with the County of Monterey influenced the work you want to do in the future.
I think just working on a climate action plan, being exposed to all of the sectors, it's been great because I've learned so much, but it's also made it a little bit more difficult to be like, oh, which out of all of these different possible sectors or fields would I be interested in? So I think it's a good problem to have, but I find myself changing my mind every 5 seconds. So it's exciting. At least I know a little bit more about what the options are.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Olivia. Next, we will hear from Teagan, followed by Amelia Kane, serving with the Marina Coast Water District. But for now, take it away, Teagan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teagan Felknor-Edwards. I'm serving with the Office of Strategic Planning and Innovation with the City of Elk Grove. I worked on a couple different projects this year, but the one I'm going to focus on in the presentation is a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. It was conducted from 2021 to 2022, but using 2019 data. And the inventory was focused on city operations, so it was not community-wide. So there were 2 main project deliverables I was working on, and those reflect the goals of the project. The first was the inventory itself. There have been 2 previous inventories done for Elk Grove in 2009 and 2017. So there's a large gap in data sources, and one of my main goals was completing the inventory to establish a new baseline that could be used to monitor city emissions and ultimately work towards some of those climate action plan goals the city has. The second goal was related to capacity. And so my deliverable there was to create a greenhouse gas emissions inventory guide to document my processes, as well as to create a replicable process and a roadmap for whatever future member of staff or future CivicSpark fellow tackles the project next. So building the capacity for further inventories in the city's long-term future. So to actually take a look at some of the data we came up with, in a lot of inventories, buildings and facilities is the largest. However, we had a bit of an unusual result in that our employee commute was the largest section of the city operations emissions, with the city fleet being the second largest proportion and buildings facilities actually coming in third. If we can go to the next slide. I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into that employee commute survey because that's what really kind of stood out about our inventory results. So the data we collected was via a survey that was sent out to all citywide staff in March of 2022. We ended up getting 178 responses, and respondents came from every major city, team, and department, which is really great to see that level of kind of buy-in and commitment from city staff to support our project. The graphic on the right is from a fact sheet I put together after we completed the employee commute survey to share the results back with city staff. So 97% of city employees drive to work alone, and 90% of them we discovered are driving non-hybrid gas or diesel powered vehicles. So it's really not surprising, maybe based on those stats, that we did have such a large share of emissions coming from the employee commute. That said, it definitely points to some definite areas of improvement that the city can undertake if they do wish to reduce their emissions. So just under 60% of the city operations emissions are coming from transportation between the city fleet and the employee commute. The city this year has begun work on a fleet electrification plan, which will make drastic emissions reductions within the employee commute, or the city fleet in the long term. The employee commute, I think, is going to prove a bit more tricky just because it will require behavioral changes, It's going to be potentially expensive in the long term, and it's going to be something the city employees have a lot of control over. However, there are some strategies the city is looking into, and I'm proud that this inventory will hopefully support that and be able to guide some of those. Those would include potentially allowing more work from home to minimize the amount of commuting, installing charging stations at city facilities or additional charging stations, increasing access to public transit, as well as developing active transportation strategies to allow local employees to commute on non-carbon intensive means. So yeah, this is a project I did. I'm very grateful to have a chance to share it with everyone. And yeah, very happy to have been a CivicSpark Fellow this year and work with the city of Elk Grove.
Congratulations, Teagan, and thank you for your service. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Hi, Teagan, I have a question. I'm just curious, I'm wondering if the huge proportion of folks commuting solo, like by themselves, I'm wondering if COVID was a factor in that, or if that was something you all were able to determine with your data.
That's definitely the challenge, because we're conducting a survey in 2022 to be used for 2019 inventory, and that's definitely one of the kind of more imperfect parts of it. The goal of using 2019 as the baseline was to have a pre-COVID baseline, knowing that the previous 2 years would have been anomalous. That said, I don't think we realized how much the pandemic changed behavior patterns. And so I don't know, it's a really good point you bring up. I do think that might have contributed. I also think some people might have moved away from the city or moved further away if you're commuting less in over time. So that's definitely, yeah, that's definitely something where it's, in the ideal world, we would be able to have the perfect baseline, but I think that we tried to mitigate some of those factors. And I think adding in an appendix to the documents I produced, kind of mentioning some of those factors, will hopefully help account for that in the future.
Cheyenne?
So addressing Cheyenne's question, the city, so I believe it was all remote for part of 2020. It was obviously before I joined the city. And then since then, there's been a minimum, everyone has to be in office at least 3 days a week, but some people are in office more or less. We tried to account for that in our calculations. And one of the cool parts of the project was I got to do math for the first time in a long time, since high school, to be honest. And so one of the factors we did work in, we asked folks, how many days in office are you per week? And then we scaled that. So we were not, it was trying to account for some of those factors of how often people are in office. We requested in the survey to respond as if you were based on your 2019 patterns. That said, we didn't exclude staff from the survey who have been hired since 2019. So there's definitely a lot of estimation going on, and we tried to do the best we could to minimize that. But that said, yeah, we'll see how the future inventories are. I'm really curious to see how that share changes and if that reflects, hopefully it doesn't reflect any errors in mathematics or anything, but more so changes in behavior over the long term.
Great. Well, thank you again, Teagan. Next up, we'll hear from Amelia, followed by Sofia Rodas, with serving with the County of Ventura. So without further ado, take it away, Amelia.
Hi everyone. I'm Amelia Kane, and I've spent this past year serving at the Marina Coast Water District. And my work has centered around the district's goal of being able to operate and provide services to customers in a sustainable way, and more specifically without generating greenhouse gas emissions. So to do this, I was directed to develop the district's municipal climate action plan. And one of the first steps in this process is generating a baseline emissions inventory to get a sense of the district's emission sources. So as you can see on the left, I started this process with a lot of research on inventories and on different inventory tools available. I felt having a tool to guide me and ensure accurate calculations was really essential. So after doing some comparison, I advised the district to become members of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, in order to gain access to their tool called ClearPath. And once I had this access, I collected the activity data from staff of the district who provided energy bills, gas bills from the fleet, waste collection bills, and more that allowed me to generate the inventory. And then once I completed the inventory, I analyzed the emissions data, and it became clear that, as expected, a majority of the district's emissions come from the energy used to power the water and wastewater facilities that they operate. And you can see this on the top right in figure 1 that outlines the emissions by sector, that those emissions accounted for about 53% of the district's total emissions, so over half. So then the next step was to forecast the emissions, and I used ClearPath to forecast to 2040 using employee and service population predicted growth rates. This helped me see how much needed to be reduced and led me to researching and developing strategies the district should implement to reduce emissions. This also involved quantifying possible strategies to see just how many emissions and what kind of an impact a strategy could make. Then looking at engagement, throughout this process, I met with staff to develop the inventory and discuss possible strategies, as well as gain insight into more specific goals within the overall vision that the district has. So through these conversations, there was many strategies that I outlined as possible ways for the district to reduce emissions, but the strategy that the district saw as one of the fastest and simplest strategy to implement, if funding were able to be found, is upgrading to 100% renewable energy through our CCA, which is Central Coast Community Energy. So this was something that I focused on during the latter half of my fellowship and worked to implement. I researched and estimated the cost of this upgrade, met with 3 CE staff members for more information and coordination. And I also presented at a public board meeting the inventory data for the whole baseline 2018 year and gave potential reduction strategies and focused the presentation on the impact that that upgrade to 100% renewable energy could have. And the action items in my presentation were for the board to approve this upgrade and to form a climate action plan ad hoc committee. So with me able to show the board this impact of upgrading and the importance that the district reduce emissions, both of these items were approved. So the district has already upgraded to 100% renewable energy, greatly decreasing their annual emissions associated with their electricity, as well as they formed a committee that will allow for the effective communication and continuation of this work. And then along with these approvals, I'm leaving the district with the tools and next steps outlined that are needed to continue this work and complete a climate action plan. So then if we go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight the impact on the emissions of the upgrade to 100% renewable energy. So this diagram was included in my presentation, and it shows the district's 2018 emissions by scope, which allows sectors of emissions to be broken more into their sources. So you can see that 53% of the district's emissions are scope 2 emissions from grid electricity. And by switching to 100% renewable energy, therefore removing the carbon emissions associated with this energy, the district has cut over half of their overall emissions, which is shown by the whited out scope 2 sectors. So this has been a great first step in reducing emissions, and I'm really glad that I've been able to show district staff and the board the impact that this action has. And next, the district will need to start implementing strategies that impact those scope 1 and 3 emissions, particularly the second and third largest sectors, that is vehicle fleet and employee commute. As well, they will need to continue development of the CAAP, including an implementation plan to help ensure this work is done in an effective and equitable manner. So thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Excellent work, Amelia. Thank you for your service. We have a question coming in from Sky. What are some lessons learned or recommendations you would give to other water districts looking to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions?
I think for water districts, it can be tricky because every water district has a different source of water and different equipment. Like for the Marina Coast Water District, they don't treat any water, so they don't have a water treatment plant or a wastewater treatment plant. They only distribute. So, you know, they had a lot of emissions from the energy used to just power all their pumps and wells and lift stations. So definitely just, you know, looking into the details. Vehicle fleet is also a really big one that I think a lot of districts will have to work on, because all these pumps and different facilities are all spread out. And so it requires travel between them for the operators to work on them. So I think those are some things that I learned from doing this.
Nice. And Julia has a question. Did you ever have experience using ClearPath prior to your service term?
I did not. Yeah, I just learned ClearPath as I went, but it's pretty user friendly, and you get a technical advisor when you are a member of ICLEI. So I was able to ask her any questions I had with more technical difficulties.
Excellent. And one final question, Sophia asks, what was your favorite aspect of your project work?
Yeah, similar to Teagan, I hadn't done math in a long time. And I actually kind of enjoyed getting to kind of work with numbers again, and take the data from the inventory and make graphs and charts, and analyze it, and take data that was maybe not something that anybody would understand and kind of put it in a way that I could present at a board meeting and people would be able to understand what the data meant. So.
Great. Well, thank you again, Amelia. Next up, we'll hear from Sofia, followed by Julia Olsen, who has served with Yolo County. Without further ado, Sofia, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Layla. So as said, my name is Sofia, and I have been working with the County of Ventura Resource Management Agency. I've been working on general plan implementation, and for my poster, I decided to focus on environmental justice in general plan implementation. So 4 deliverables that I'll be focusing on are the completed Spanish translation of the County of Ventura General Plan, drafted bilingual community outreach documents for long-range planning projects, my assistance with the electronic general plan, and the completion of a study for the designation of disadvantaged communities. So those are the what I did, and I think it's really important to touch on why these are, how these are affecting the community. So all of these projects go into increased accessibility, and starting with increased planning documents translated into Spanish. For the Spanish translation of the general plan, I peer reviewed the documents translated by an official translator, and I made sure that all the county translation practices were maintained so that the Spanish-speaking community could easily access them. In addition to that, I presented them to both the managers of the Resource Management Agency and to the Board of Supervisors, which was really exciting. And to increase the availability of the resource, public notices were put in the local papers so that other individuals could know that those resources were available. And in the same vein, I helped create bilingual frequently asked question documents for a nuanced oil and gas project. It actually went to the Planning Commission today, which was really exciting to see. And ordinance documents are super nuanced. So brainstorming with the Planning Division on how to make these accessible for the common person was something that I was excited to be part of. And then moving on to the electronic general plan, I helped with creating details for the electronic general plan that made them more accessible. I think that changing a PDF into a website was something that helps streamline a lot of searches and makes it more user-friendly. So this will be helpful for both community members and planners alike. And finally, moving on to the designation of disadvantaged communities, I helped analyze virus screen data. And so you can see in the bottom left that I presented it in a format that's easily accessible. So you can see pesticide use, contamination of water resources, exposure of hazardous waste, lack of access to education, lack of affordable housing, lack of bilingual resources and services, and the presence of low-income households are things that are afflicting the communities in Ventura County. And moving on, I also helped create outreach materials for the public workshops and collaborated interjurisdictionally. Next slide. So these are some visuals. On the left, you can see the Spanish translation of the general plan. And this was an exhibit for my project to the Board of Supervisors. And this is the electronic general plan where you can see bookmarks. That's one of the features that I like the most. And you can bookmark policies and programs. So that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Excellent presentation, Sophia. Congratulations and thank you for your service. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. Oh, I see one coming in from Julia. What was your favorite aspect of your project?
I think I really enjoyed the research aspect. So like doing the calendar screen data and seeing how the community is affected by different potential pollutants is something that I found really beneficial.
Excellent. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you again, Sophia. Next up, we will hear from our final speaker, Julia Olsen, who has been serving with Yolo County. Julia, take it away.
Hi, I'm Julia Olsen, and I have been serving with Yolo County for my service term. Yolo County had declared a climate crisis as an emergency in 2020, and this required an immediate and urgent mobilization. And that's where I come in with as a CivicSpark fellow. Originally, the goal was to assess the 2011 CAAP for Yolo County, but what ended up happening was the needing a communications assessment within Yolo County to help build engagement for their 2030 CAAP. Yolo County has been, since the emergency resolution in 2020, have been working towards an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable just transition to reverse greenhouse gas emissions. And since the Board of Supervisors directed the formation of the Yolo County Climate Action Commission, the county has been working on developing early action projects to help inform and build out the 2030 CAAP. With that being said, one of the things that we noticed was missing was the communication streams for Yolo County. So that being the goal was to have start community outreach and engagement. However, after in the process of that outreach, figuring out what those gaps were in the current outreach process helped inform what needed to happen from there on out. So after noticing that Yolo County needed a website update, as well as a strategy for communications plans for the 2030 CAAP, I researched and developed research best practices and stakeholder groups within the county that would benefit from outreach for the CAAP. And from there, started creating strategies to create an online presence to build community engagement. So the Yolo County Climate Action Commission identified wanting social media outlets, a newsletter, and updates to the website. So I began developing a communications strategy, which I will fortunately get to continue on with Yolo County as an administrative ASA. So I'm really looking forward to that and being able to see this work through. It's been really exciting and fulfilling to identify what needs to happen to inform community outreach for the CAAP. And so as the community engagement strategy is finalized and the social media streams and website and newsletter are being developed, and pretty soon I will be able to work with the Yolo County Climate Action Commission members on their equity and engagement for community outreach for their 2030 CAAP as it's being written. So if the next steps would be to finalize updates for the communication streams to build that foundation for future engagement, and launch a climate action and sustainability newsletter, finalize the community engagement strategy, and then begin working with the Climate Action Commission and staff to begin engagement, hopefully in person. And this is also a great place for the next fellow to hop in and help with carrying out engagement. Next slide, please. And I just want to say thank you so much to my regional coordinator, Layla, for being really supportive along the way. And as I've navigated changes in the service term, it's been really exciting, and I'm really grateful for Yolo County and my site supervisors, Kristen and Taro, for helping me and being the guiding force for a lot of this work. It's been really exciting, and I'm really grateful to continue on with Yolo County. Thank you.
Congratulations, Julia, both on completing or nearly completing your 11 months of service, and for also securing a full-time position at Yolo County. We're really lucky to have you. Excellent. Does anyone have any questions for Julia? Apparently my dog had a question, but unfortunately I cannot translate. Daniel asks what your favorite part of your project is or was.
I would say that being able to see what goes into creating a climate action commission, and then just the formation that of Yolo County sustainability as kind of an entity has been really cool to just watch it from kind of the ground up. There's just really ambitious goals and a lot of really encouraging and inspiring energy around climate change. So it's been really exciting to be able to watch how that process unfolds from a government perspective and have an inside look at that. So that's been my favorite part. Thank you.
Excellent. What are you most excited about moving into your full-time position with Yolo County?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to see a lot of the kind of behind the scenes work and planning actually happen in terms of community engagement. So all the strategizing behind social media plans, it's going to be in the website update and the communication streams. It's going to be really exciting to actually have that ready to go and to be regularly updating those communication streams instead of building them out process. So I'm really excited to see that through.
Great. Well, I'm excited for you. Thank you again, Julia. That's a wrap. One final congratulations to all fellows who presented today, and thank you to our audience for your participation, support, and encouragement. This concludes today's poster symposium presentation. But if you would like to continue to support our fellows by reaching out to them on LinkedIn, all fellow contact info is available on our website. If you'd like to attend an additional poster session, we have our final one tomorrow from 1 to 3. And we also have a graduation celebration on August 11th. And if you're interested in attending that, feel free to register. Finally, recordings of these sessions will be made available on our website and in a follow-up email to all participants at the end of July. So it's coming soon. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you again for attending today's poster symposium. And we all hope you have a great week and a great weekend. Bye, everyone.